Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Well, for Donald Trump, the stakes of the next presidential election are clear. We all know him. He is running for his freedom. To put an even finer point on it, he's running for his life. I mean, the ex-president now faces 78 criminal counts across 3 jurisdictions and a combined 641 years in prison. At age 77, if he is convicted of any of these offenses, just one, he could spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. The stakes for the country are equally dire. Donald Trump tried to end America's constitutional republic, and we know that and have known that for a while from the facts as they are alleged in the most recent federal indictment, the facts as they are laid out in the 840-page Select Committee report, and the facts as we all witnessed them with our own 2 eyes in the run-up to and on the day of January 6, 2021. Had Donald Trump convinced enough people to go along with his scheme, we could be living right now in a kind of presidential dictatorship. And he has explicitly said and signaled multiple times that he is running again to finish the job.
I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family. Name a special prosecutor. And all others involved with the destruction of our elections, our borders, and our country itself. They're destroying our country. And when I'm reelected, and we will get reelected, we have no choice. We're not going to have a country anymore. I will totally obliterate the deep state. We will obliterate the deep state.
The ex-president now finds himself cornered legally. He's mostly alone. Have you noticed that? None of his family members by his side. He's unable to summon the mobs he once was, and he's been denuded of the official power of the presidency. He's smaller in many ways. He's not getting any younger. And he's attempting to threaten his way through. In a post this afternoon, he threatened, apparently, his prosecutors, writing, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." If he is elected next year, Donald Trump could very well escape accountability. That's the plan of him and his advisors, to get elected and then avoid facing trial on the dozens of charges he faces, or drop the charges or avoid sentencing. And then upon taking office, he would set about the task of completing the unfinished work of January 6th, which was the work of destroying American democracy. As the New York Times reported last month, Trump and his allies are planning a sweeping expansion of presidential power over the machinery of government, reshaping the structure of the executive branch to concentrate far greater authority directly in his hands. It includes bringing independent agencies under direct presidential control, reviving the practices of impounding funds, refusing to spend money Congress has appropriated for programs the president doesn't like, making it easier to replace career civil servants, removing State Department and intelligence agency officials he describes as the sick political class that hates our country. Now, let's be clear. A lot of this is tough talk from a guy who's in a lot of trouble. You know, hitting out the caps lock on his Truth Social posts. But you got to take it seriously if you've ever seen an image of what happened on January 6th, right? The guy's running for president, he could win. Imagine how our system of justice would run in that world. I mean, really, it's hard to think about, but it could happen. Taking the oath, he's elected the president. Maybe he would pardon his as yet unindicted co-conspirator Jeffrey Clark and finally succeed installing that guy as attorney general. Not a particularly far-fetched idea if Donald Trump wins the presidency again. He could not be making it more clear that he intends to defeat American democracy once and for all if he is given the means. And obviously, it goes without saying, even though I have to say it, that a man like that should not be allowed anywhere near the levers of power. That was clear to me and many of you 8 years ago when he came down the escalator. And there are mechanisms to stop him short of putting him in prison for the rest of his natural life. First of all, there's a really good case to be made. He should be barred from holding office under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, Section 3 of which states, and I quote, "No person shall hold any office who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, like the president, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same." And there's been a movement spring up to try to bar his reelection on precisely these grounds. Lawsuits in the courts or legislation. And I got to say, it hasn't gotten a ton of attention, but I think it has a lot of merit. I think Donald Trump plainly engaged in insurrection and plainly should therefore be ineligible for future office per the U.S. Constitution. I think the original intent of that amendment would see it that way, too. But of course, there's another way that he could be barred from future office, and that's impeachment. Remember that one? After January 6th, Donald Trump was impeached in the House for the second time, first president ever. He could have been convicted in the Senate and, pursuant to the conviction, barred from holding future office. 7 members of his own party voted for that conviction. It was the most bipartisan support for an impeachment conviction in the history of this nation. At one point, even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was reportedly considering voting to convict. But when it came down to it, McConnell just washed his hands of the whole thing, shrugged, told the country, not my job to hold Donald Trump accountable, but, maybe someone else should do it.
Our system of government gave the Senate a specific task. The Constitution gives us a particular role. This body is not invited to act as the nation's overarching moral tribunal. President Trump is still liable for everything he did while he was in office as an ordinary citizen. Unless the statute of limitations is run, still liable for everything he did while he was in office. Didn't get away with anything yet. We have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation. And former presidents are not immune from being accountable by either one.
All these guys, they're all so tough, aren't they, at their lecterns? Stern, hectoring, posting in caps lock. Mitch McConnell, he's not out of the woods yet. Bravely standing on the Senate floor to dump the problem of a sociopathic, maniacal hater of American democracy on someone else. You should really do something about this guy. And thereby allowing the ex-president to escape accountability and the obvious punishment for his crimes, which is to bar him from running for office again, where he can now do so and threaten the Republic. And Mitch McConnell voted to acquit Donald Trump. He told Republicans to vote their conscience, and all but 7 voted to acquit. So now that someone else has actually done the thing that McConnell said they should do, held him liable for his alleged crimes under our system of justice, gosh, I haven't heard a lot from Mitch. He seems silent on the matter. To be clear, we are where we are with both accountability for Donald Trump and the fate of the American constitutional republic. I'm not overstating things. Hanging in the balance, a toss-up, because Mitch McConnell and all the Senate Republicans and the whole Republican Party just refused to do the obvious, simple, and straightforward thing. They could have just convicted him. We wouldn't be here. But they refused to convict him for inciting the violent insurrection that concussed a bunch of police officers and threatened the life of the vice president. The insurrection that went on for hours violently in front of us, for which over 1,000 people have been charged, that we all watched happen. The one that he incited, that we knew he incited, they could have convicted him for that, and they could have barred him from holding future office. But they didn't. And so then we now have them to thank.